Welcome back to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm Sumantha, and today we're talking about something that has been requested, which is ways to attract students without using social media. Now, this isn't going to be an anti-social media episode as such. I think social media is a fantastic tool, and I've built 2 businesses using predominantly social media. So this is more about exploring other ways to attract students that you could see as alternatives, or you could do it in accompaniment to your social media marketing. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Upgrade Your Education Business podcast. I'm your host, Sumantha, and I'm so pleased you're here. As an education business owner myself and a former teacher, I understand the nuances that only apply to us. So in this podcast, I share fluff-free, tailored and actionable ideas that you can mould to suit your needs. If you'd like to take this conversation further, please do reach out. I would love to meet you. And finally, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review. That way, you'll be helping me help more people. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy. Something that will really help you think of ideas is to think about what the function of marketing is. And if you think about it, if I just bunch it together with visibility, it's to really get your name out there, to get you in front of new people. It's to stay front of mind and to spread the word about what you offer. So while social media is one of those ways you can do that, where you have access to lots of people, there are also other ways. So today I'll be sharing 10 ideas, but you can generate more by yourself just by taking that concept, asking yourself, how are the different ways I could get in front of new audiences? How can I spread the word about what I do? So let's go for the 10 ideas that I'm going to share today. The first one is an obvious one, and it's nice and easy, which is to spread the word amongst your network, your personal network, your professional network. If you're at the very beginning stages of setting up your business, this is great, even if you plan to promote yourself on social media, because things like social media marketing, email marketing, all of these things take a bit of time. They take time to gain momentum. But speaking to people and spreading the word amongst people that you already know is something you can do instantly, and it can give you a really fast return. So think of people who are in your world. It could be that you have former colleagues or present colleagues who you can talk about, who you can even remind them and just ask them, if you have anyone who you think is looking for a tutor, or if you're not a tutor, just, looking for whatever you offer, if they could maybe pass your name around, if they can pass your name across. You might want to look for friends of yours or just mention it. I mean, when you meet up with friends, talking about what you're doing is really natural. So it doesn't have to feel forced. But I know that if a friend of mine said, look, I've started this new business, would you mind just spreading the word? I know I absolutely wouldn't mind. But sometimes people just need that reminder. They need to be asked to do that. So you might be thinking, well, I don't really know who to ask. I don't know who to speak to. So here's a little action point for you. Grab your phone and scan through your contacts. If you are on social media, maybe look through your network and see who you can speak to. Think about any social plans you have coming up and just intentionally remind yourself to speak to them about what you do. Maybe ask them to keep their eyes and ears out for anyone who needs you. Something that I notice is that I keep my professional and personal social media presence very, very separate. And I know I'm not meant to be talking about social media today, but you can map this to other techniques. And every now and again in the past, I have posted something on my personal profile where maybe I've talked about just celebrating a great result, a great achievement that one of my students have achieved. And almost always, someone who I haven't met for 20 years, someone I went to school with, will contact me saying, I didn't realize you were a tutor. I'm actually looking for one. So you really don't know where opportunities will come your way. So stay really open and just spread the word. Now, building on that is my second idea, which is to really intentionally connect with colleagues and people who are in your space. Now, when I say in your space, let's say you're a tutor, I don't mean just connecting with fellow tutors. There are lots of people who work in the education space, and it's worth just widening those connections and building those relationships. If people are working in the education field, then chances are they are speaking to families, they are speaking to children, they're in that area that may really serve you. So they could be people who bring leads your way. They could be people who you collaborate with. You just never know what kind of opportunities will come as a result of forming these connections. And it's something I spoke really heavily about in my recent LinkedIn webinar. And if you're in the mastermind, the bonus video on how to create storytelling content authentically, how to really connect with people is all on there. But if you think about how you can map that to real life, maybe you might attend some events that are going on locally. Maybe you might attend some fetes and go around and have a chat with different people who are involved there. If you go to a school fete and there is someone who is a bouncy castle provider, you never know. They are working with families, they're working with children, they have chats with people. You never know. They might be able to refer someone your way. Maybe you refer them as well. So in your local area, if someone is looking for, a bouncy castle provider for their party, intentionally say, I'll mention my name and get in touch with them so that you're forming these different relationships in your locality, in your area. Now, outside of social media, there are also many online forums, there are groups, in person, online, and it's really worth just exploring. Now, you may not have time to participate in absolutely everything, but if it's something that you are trying to work out, then it's worth exploring and then really focusing on the groups and the communities that you enjoy being a part of and that you feel really serves your business. Now, my third idea leans on referrals. We know that word of mouth in education is huge. It's gold. And although we don't necessarily need to rely on that, we could incentivize it. Now, some people don't like the idea of incentivizing people recommending them because they feel like it somehow takes something away from that recommendation being genuine. But quite honestly, if someone is working with you, they've been working with you for a while, if you give them an incentive to recommend you to other people, well, they're not doing it inauthentically. Yeah, they get something out of it, but they are working with you. They are investing with you. So they're not just recommending someone for the sake of it who they think is rubbish, just so they can get a freebie, for example. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you're protecting the way you do your referrals. And when you do them, think about what you might be able to offer that's really quick and easy for you and it's appealing to your client. And make sure you make it really clear how to actually recommend you. Don't make it complicated. People often don't remember website addresses, for example, so you might just give them a little poster that they can pass on, or maybe you just say, just pass my name and number, that's absolutely fine. So make all of that really clear. This doesn't have to be complicated. It can be that, if you refer me, then I'll offer you a half price lesson, for example, or a free resource, or whatever it might be. Sometimes people just need that extra reminder or that extra encouragement to recommend you. There will always be people in your world who will recommend you without any asking, any prompting. And if I ever set up any referral programs, I quite like to see it as a thank you present because some of these people are recommending me anyway. They've got nothing to gain by recommending me, but I want to thank them. And so I give them something in return for that. Also, don't forget to keep in touch with parents who you have worked with. So they may not be currently working with you, but if they've worked with you and had this great experience, life's busy, life moves on. But if you just pop into their inbox or on their phone and just remind them and ask them how they're doing, how's their child getting on, if you know anyone who is looking for tuition, please do pass my name on. It's just that extra reminder. My fourth idea is to look at something like email marketing. Now, this isn't me telling you that you need email marketing or trying to sell it to you, but there are a lot of benefits to things like email marketing. You see, on social media, the social media platforms own that space. We don't. So, recently TikTok got banned in a certain country and has been in the past. So all those creators who are making money from TikTok in that country, overnight, they had to adapt. They had to find a different way. It will have really affected them. Also, people take social media breaks. When we post on social media, we're very reliant on the algorithm and our strategies showing our content to people. However, people don't tend to take an email break. If you follow some really fundamental rules, You can avoid your email landing in someone's spam folder, for example. So with something like email marketing, you kind of own that data and people are giving you permission to keep in touch with them. So you can go for an email marketing platform if you want to automate a lot of this, but you don't have to. And I'll talk about both in a second. The point is that when you explore something like email marketing, you're still able to maintain that one-to-many style of communication as you can on social media. Now, if you want to do this really simply, if you just want to dip your toe in the water, or maybe you don't really have the budget to invest in a platform, there are some free ones like MailChimp, which I have to admit I'm not a huge fan of. I think it's really complicated. There's also MailerLite. There's also ConvertKit. They have free plans. My experience of MailerLite is that people grow out of them really fast, so I tend to move people straight onto ConvertKit. I'm going to provide all the links in the show notes so that you can set up that free account with them really easily. Some of these aren't even free trials, they're actually free accounts. Now, ConvertKit's really intuitive. It's really easy to get started with. I use Kartra right now, and the reason I use Kartra is because it's an all-in-one platform. I host the Tutors Mastermind on there, I host courses, resources, and because it's all in one, it doesn't make sense for me to pay separately for another email marketing platform. But honestly, if it wasn't an all-in-one, I would stick to ConvertKit. It is by far my favorite platform. It's really, really easy to use and extremely powerful. So like I said, I'll pop all the links in the show notes. Now, if you want to get started without investing your time or money into a platform, you could simply gather some email addresses. You could set up a quick form, for example. So let's say people have expressed interest in working with you. You could set up a free Google form. The thing to make sure, in order to be compliant, at least in the UK, is to make sure they're ticking a box that where they are agreeing to receive communications from you. So if you wanted to send, let's say, a newsletter, then you're doing that with their consent. So you can still do email marketing without an email marketing platform. It will be more time consuming. It will be more fiddly. You won't necessarily be able to be as sophisticated with it. However, it might be a great way to get started, to keep in touch with people via email. Now, when you're emailing people out, do remember your purpose here. We're talking in this podcast episode about attracting students. So even though we might be sending, let's say, a newsletter, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to give people a bulletin of everything we have been up to. We want to tell people what they want to know. How can we associate ourselves with being a helpful resource, someone whose email they should open? So think about keeping your finger on the pulse in your world and providing them with some latest updates. Maybe you give them a resource of the month or something like that. But always make clear that you have something to sell and give them a clear call to action. What is it they should do if they're interested in working with you? Is it to book a call? Is it to press a button and buy? Whatever it is, keep reminding them that you do sell something. Because regardless of what method of marketing you use, you don't want to train your audience to just keep expecting freebies from you. Now, my fifth tip is to optimize your website if you have one. Now, when I say optimize your website, let's start with the basics. We want to make sure that it's really clear. You're guiding people through the journey in a really clear and logical way. It's not too cluttered. You want to make sure that you're making clear what you sell. If you want to display prices, I quite like displaying prices, and how they take the next step with you. Can they enroll by pressing a button? Do they need to contact you? Make sure that everywhere it's really easy to work out how to contact you. They shouldn't have to dig around to take that very important step. So we've got all the basics, provide testimonials, that kind of thing. But you can also look at SEO. SEO stands for search engine optimization. So let's say someone opens Google to do a search and they search for, I don't know, an entrance exam tutor for a certain school. And let's say it's a school that you specialize in supporting. Then you want your website ideally to show up on the first page of the results, ideally as high as possible. Now, I'm not an expert in SEO, and I've made a point of making sure I'm not an expert because years ago I did study it, I did look into it, and something I realized was that it requires constant work, it's very deep work, and you have to stay up to date with algorithm changes. It changes so fast. And I decided that There are other ways I can be visible. There are other ways I can really direct people to my website without focusing on this massive task of SEO. So I'm not discouraging you from looking at it. There are some basic things that you can do that are really easy. I'm not discouraging you, but it's not something I'm going to delve into because I can't, with integrity, talk about it in much depth. But there are little workarounds. So, for example, if you set up a Google My Business profile, then you can appear really high up in Google search results for free, or at least at the time of recording this, it's free to set up a profile. That could direct people then to your website. So there are things you can do, things like having a profile on somewhere like Pinterest, which is a search engine. And, if you have a profile on these different platforms, even if you're not massively active, it does push you to the top. It does boost the chance of you showing up in search results. So you can almost piggyback on other people's SEO efforts, so to speak. The point is, we really want our websites, if we have one, to be working hard for us and to make sure that we are thinking about how we can make that website more visible. My sixth tip is to think about creating video content. YouTube isn't a social media platform, it's a search engine and it's video based. And if you enjoy teaching on camera, then this can be a great way to attract students. You can share free kind of tips and quick wins, things they're going to really get value from. And the great thing about it is they get to meet you without meeting you. Instead of you being a profile picture and a text post or a still picture, you come to life for them. They get an experience of what it's like to learn with you. Now, the important distinction between YouTube being a search engine and not a social media platform is important. You still need a strategy. If you really want to optimize something like YouTube, you still need a strategy because people need to search for you. You need to come up in those results. But the point is that one piece of content, unlike social media, will last for a really long time because YouTube will prioritize showing people the most useful video, not the latest video. You can filter things from, to say I want to see something from this year, for example, but by default, they will show you the most relevant video. So that can be a really great way to attract students in a really natural way using your strengths. However, look, I'm an online educator. I work completely online, but it took me a long time to feel confident on video. So I know that just because you work online doesn't necessarily mean creating video is going to be easy. But it's certainly something that you can play around with, that you can toy with, you can experiment with. There is so much great software out there now that really helps you produce good quality video. If you're watching this on YouTube, I don't have a complicated setup, and I think the quality is relatively good. I've invested in a platform, it's actually a software online called Riverside, and I have got a ring light on my right-hand side. I've got a small one attached to my laptop. My laptop is propped up on a box to get the right height, and I have my podcasting microphone, which was secondhand on Facebook Marketplace. So I don't have this massive setup, and I haven't invested hundreds and thousands into equipment. I must say I also have another light behind me. It's called a softbox because the lighting in my room is not very good. The point is that you need very little to get started with video content. So it's something you can definitely try out and just build a bit of confidence with. The same rules as I mentioned with email marketing apply here. So even if you're creating a video where it's a learning video for people who are on YouTube, let's say parents who are looking to help their child or a student or whatever it might be, you still want to remind them that you have something to sell. You want to make sure that you're weaving what you sell into your content. Otherwise, you do risk just training people to expect things from you. Also, you can use video content slightly differently. Instead of relying on YouTube and people finding you and, teaching them essentially for free on there, something you can do is use YouTube as kind of back-end support to your selling. So let's say, for example, you are on social media, or let's say someone's come through word of mouth or through email marketing. However, you can then direct them, you can point them to a YouTube video that might show a little bit about how you teach, that might answer some of the questions they have. It gives them a try before you buy. I do have a YouTube channel for my tuition business, but there's not a lot on there. There's only a few videos. But those videos have actually supported in me attracting clients, because when I say have a discovery call with someone and they're not sure about something, I direct them to that. when I was advertising my tuition business, I would show snippets of those videos, and that would attract people. So video content doesn't have to be at the front line, if you like. You can use it for back-end support just to support your other efforts. So it would be very complementary with things like email marketing. Now, my 7th tip is to follow up with past clients and even prospective students. I know I touched on this before, but I'm just honing in on this aspect because there's a lot of power in following up. Often what happens is we follow up with people who could be a client of ours. Maybe we've spoken to them and we follow up with them to see whether they have questions, if they're ready to make a decision. We keep in touch with our existing clients. But when someone finishes working with us, let's say we've helped them prepare for an exam, they've taken the exam and it's finished, we very rarely think to check in. And, we're busy, aren't we? So it's difficult to make the time to do that. But if you do want to explore ways to connect with people and make sales without using social media, or not just solely relying on social media, this is really worthwhile. Something that I do is I keep a record of all the students that I teach. It's just on a spreadsheet. It's really simple. And I make a note of, if they're taking an exam, which they usually are, I make a note of the grade they started with me on. And then I make a note every time they have an assessment at school of the grade they got and then their final result. Now, that is really useful to help me showcase the progress that students make with me. It helps me create case studies, I suppose, things like case studies, not just testimonials. But also, I make little notes in there, or at least I used to. I have to admit, I don't do this so much anymore, but I used to make little notes in there about the school that they were going to next, or the next thing they were moving on to. And something I would do is I would email a parent or WhatsApp them. A few months later, I wouldn't leave too long a gap and just check in and see how they're doing. And and it would be really genuine because, I would miss teaching that child. I saw them every single week, sometimes multiple times a week for a long time. So I would just touch base and ask after them and everything. And I wouldn't ask for a recommendation as such. I wouldn't ask them to spread the word. But very naturally, you are staying front of mind. It circles back to what I said at the beginning of this episode. What is marketing? What's the purpose? So it would bring me front of mind to them, and I often found that referrals would come through them. Also, I've been in situations where there are siblings and it's a few years later, and because I have stayed front of mind through things like my marketing, they have thought to contact me again. My 8th tip is to think about collaborating with colleagues. They could be people who do the same thing as you, but maybe they teach a different subject. They could be people who are just professionals in our industry. For example, you could be a maths tutor and you could team up with a science tutor to run a joint webinar, or you could team up with a publisher or an examiner or whoever it might be. There are so many different combinations that can be really powerful. You could even host things like in-person events. But these collaborations, they not only attract new students, but they add value for your existing audience as well, because you're bringing someone else and a guest in to speak to them. It goes a long way to positioning you as a go-to, and it gets you in front of new people because you're now getting in front of that person's audience. These kinds of collaborations are something that I really encourage in the Tutors Mastermind. We have got accountability groups that I haven't set up. These are things the Mastermind has set up. In fact, just this morning, we did a Masterminder spotlight, and in the chat while we were going live, one of the members said, I've just set up a new accountability group. It starts on Monday. Let me know if you want to join. And 3 people off the live said, yeah, I'd like to join. And these little groups, they mean that you are forming relationships with trusted people. So it means that, if you were going to refer a client, for example, you could do that with confidence. It opens the doors to running joint webinars or just working on joint projects. So it's a really exciting space to be in, the education world. There are so many different routes, there are so many different events going on that I almost feel like it's a wasted opportunity if we don't utilize the communities that we're a part of, especially if you're in something like the Tutors Mastermind, where you're paying to be in that community. My 9th tip is to leverage podcasts. Podcasting is a big thing in education. There are so many educational podcasts. Whether you have one or whether you just want to be a guest on one, It's a really great thing to boost your credibility, to get in front of new audiences. Now, in an ideal world, you would be on a podcast that your target audience listens to. But the reality is, if I think of myself as a tutor, I know that if there was one for 11 plus parents, they would probably listen because they have a huge involvement usually in supporting their child. But I know that my GCSE parents would not sit there listening to podcasts about how to improve your grades in your English GCSE, for instance. That's something that their child is more likely to listen to, if at all. So you can also use guesting on podcasts in a slightly different way. You can use it to help position yourself as a go-to. So let's imagine there was this educational podcast. Let's say the Tutors Association had a podcast and I was a guest on there. Just by sharing that fact with my audience, whether it's through email marketing, conversation, social media, I know that's a banned word in this episode. I'm struggling not to mention it. But whoever I share that to, they don't even have to listen to the episode. Maybe it won't be a topic that they're particularly interested in. However, just the fact that I've been on there, just the fact that I can show that I'm speaking to fellow educators about a topic that really supports my credibility as an educator, that fact alone boosts our authority. It's the same reason why if you go to some people's websites, it will say things like as seen in Forbes and wherever else. You aren't digging around trying to find that article that they were in Forbes, but the fact that they were featured says something. It speaks a subtext. So you can use guesting on podcasts and other visibility activities to boost your credibility. I've got loads of training on that in the Tutors Mastermind, and I know loads of the masterminders listen to this. So if you're listening and you really want to come up with a strategy that doesn't take over your life, but lasts you for the whole year, go to the visibility section in the mastermind area, and you'll find one that's called Create Your Visibility Strategy. It's really well paced. It's a really good strategy that means that you always know what to focus on, but it's not something that becomes a full-time job. And podcasts are a great way to do it. It's one of the ideas I share in there. Now for my 10th tip, and that is to attend networking events. And I'm just calling them networking events. It could be conferences, it could be a show, it could be whatever. But the point is, start, if you can, attending these events, whether they're in person or online, but even better if it's in person. There are so many that are happening right now in the education space, and there are ones that, suit different preferences. So I'll tell you some of the ones that I've been to, just so you have some ideas. The Tutors Association, they have these informal mixers. I think they call them mixers, and they're free to attend. And I really like those because they're quite small, they're very relaxed, there's no particular agenda. There's no sort of structure as such. So you just go, people are really friendly, people have a chat, they'll introduce themselves to you, and it's just a really nice way to spend an afternoon or an evening. They also have more formal events like their conference, like their awards evening, and they are more structured. There are networking opportunities, but the events tend to be a lot larger. So, there are pros and cons to both, aren't there? There's also the Connexus conference that's run by Connexus. I think it's called the National Tutors Conference. And that is in the summer. I don't know when you're listening to this, but it's normally held in the summer. And actually, that's a really nice balance of something that's quite relaxed and structured without being formal. I went last year and I'm going again this year, and I'm hoping to actually speak this year. It's 2025. Again, don't know when you're listening to this. And the thing I really liked about it was this perfect blend of the formal side where you're attending workshops and the totally chilled out side where just do what you want. And there were people having a chat, there were people relaxing, people went to their hotel rooms to have a little relax. It was just that perfect blend. So if you're not sure about going to an event, or if you are sure about going to an event but don't know which one to choose, that's just a little overview of some of the ones I've been to and what my experience of them were. If you ever want to know what any of them are like, or if you're a bit nervous, then reach out to me. I'd be happy to make arrangements to meet you if we're going to the same event. The point is here, the reason why I'm talking about this is because when you meet someone and when you speak to them and have a real conversation, you're so much more likely to remember them. So if you think about what I've been talking about with spreading the word across your network, with collaborating with colleagues. Whenever we collaborate, when we put our name against someone else, even if it's for a referral, that person has to be aligned with us. They have to be trustworthy. We need to get a good vibe from them. That can be difficult to establish just through something like social media. Whereas actually meeting people in person or online, it forms a relationship, something that's a lot more meaningful, something where someone feels confident to refer you. They feel confident to work with you. So it's a really powerful tool. We have such a great community at our fingertips. So there you have it, 10 different ideas to attract students without using social media. Remember that you can use these ideas in addition to social media. They don't have to just be alternatives, but it's up to you. And please don't forget what I mentioned at the beginning, because there are more than 10 ways. And the way to generate some ideas is to remember what your purpose is. What are you trying to achieve? And then when you work backwards from that, you can think of all the different ways that you can do that in a way that you like, in a way that suits you, and in a way that's effective. I hope you found this episode useful. Thank you as always for staying with me. If you have a quick moment, please do leave a review. It really helps me reach more people. You'll hear from me on Wednesday. Would you like to take this discussion further? Perhaps you have some questions or you'd like more ideas on tailoring your business. If so, book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes.